Warning. The following video contains spoilers for Silent Hill 2. This game is best experienced blind and I highly recommend playing it before watching this video. Lastly, the opinions stated in this video are entirely my own. With that out of the way, please enjoy the video. So if you've spent any time here on this channel, you'll know that I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. The campy story, charming voice acting, incredible survival horror gameplay loop, intricate level design, and the absurd lore are things I admired about the series. However, while I was playing the numbered entries, I regularly heard from friends that I should check out the Silent Hill games. I usually heard this, said I'll get back to it later, and kept playing Resident Evil, and while this approach was mostly fine, everything changed when I played Resident Evil 4. I hated Resident Evil 4 when I first played it. The intricate level design vanished, the game's haunting atmosphere disappeared, and the series' identity evolved from a horror to action game. Losing almost everything I loved about the series, seeing where RE5 and 6 took the franchise, and with the eventual return to form of RE7, I was a bit nervous for the future. As we all know, Capcom would develop remakes of their classic RE games, and this story brings us into the modern day. Today, I'm exhausted of the RE remakes. These are all great games, don't get me wrong, but regardless of how much money these remakes generate, things need to keep moving forward. Nevertheless, everything changed again in 2022 when the Silent Hill 2 remake was announced. This announcement, for me personally at least, could not have come at a better time. I had been growing apathetic of Resident Evil and began exploring other horror games like Dead Space and Amnesia the Bunker. I, like an idiot, forgot about Silent Hill, so the announcement was a great reminder for me to try this series. And with Silent Hill 2 receiving the remake treatment, I decided now was a great time for me to try the original. I might be weird here, but I usually like to play the original game before the remakes come out so I can wrap my mind around the team's initial vision. Limited resources and/or technological limitations force creatives to leverage unique solutions to materialize their ambitions, and after completing Silent Hill 2 and taking a few days to let it resonate with me, yeah, I get it now. Before diving into this video, I'd like to remind everyone that I recorded all of this footage live on my Twitch channel. Feel free to stop by the stream and hit the follow button if you'd like to catch me live. With that lengthy preamble out of the way, sit back, relax, and let's discuss how this game came to be by talking about its development and overall production team. Silent Hill 2 entered full production in June of 1999. Team Silent, one of Konami's legendary developers, was critically and commercially praised for releasing the original Silent Hill. Critics and fans showered the game with praise as it went on to sell over 2 million copies. With Team Silent excited to work on a sequel and Konami eager to have another successful franchise on their hands, Konami greenlit a much larger budget for Team Silent's next project as they set their sights on the PS2. Selecting the PS2 was the obvious choice since the GameCube and Xbox weren't announced in 1999. In the interest of time, and since I can barely do this with most of my video essays, I'd suggest watching Silent Hill Memories, Making of Silent Hill 2 documentary if you'd like a deep dive into this project's full development. The link will be in the video description. It's very insightful hearing from creatives, where they drew their inspiration from, and may provide another lens or perspective to how you engage with the game. I love watching these documentaries, and I implore anyone to check out the video if you're interested in Team Silent. On the topic of Team Silent and their creative endeavors, let's talk about the individuals responsible for making this game. Silent Hill 2 was directed by Masashi Tsuboyama, who worked on the original Silent Hill as a background designer. Akihiro Imamura served as the producer and is credited as a programmer on the original Silent Hill as well. Masahiro Ito was the art director on this project and was another background designer alongside Masashi Tsuboyama during the original's development. Hiroyuki Owaku was the scenario writer for Silent Hill 2, who was also an enemy programmer on Silent Hill 1, and Akira Yamaoka is responsible for this game's incredible score. We'll discuss Silent Hill 2's soundtrack a bit later, but he has a very impressive list of musical contributions throughout his career. I mean, like, just look at all of this. So, after hearing all that, if you're anything like me, you're probably scratching your head right now expecting more details or additional game contributions, right? Well, this is where things get interesting. Excluding Akira Yamaoka, who's credited on games older than Silent Hill 1, most of the team's earliest credits were with the original Silent Hill. This is a remarkably unique situation because unless the team had drastic career changes, I'm assuming the team was fairly young when they were developing this game. What I'm getting at here is that most developers don't create a game of Silent Hill 2's quality on their first attempt. Game development is incredibly complex and difficult, while neither of them directed, produced, or wrote the game's narrative, contributing to what many consider to be a timeless psychological horror masterpiece with very little experience is just astonishing. Industry experience traditionally serves as a prerequisite for positions in the working world. Titles, promotions, and years of experience are paramount for landing big jobs. Despite all of this, it's really inspiring to see a bunch of young developers be given responsibility of the Silent Hill franchise and carrying the torch so early on in their careers. Crafting a game of Silent Hill 2's quality is genuinely unbelievable, especially considering it's pretty much their first attempt. I'm not sure if other video essays dive into this, but it's crazy thinking that Silent Hill 2 was a lot of the team's first time in these senior roles. The best compliment I can give this game is that everyone's first game isn't a Silent Hill 2. Anyways, let's shift gears and talk about the actual game. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I usually spend time discussing graphics and presentation separately. Today, I'd like to do something a little different and only talk about the presentation. The impetus here is that I played the PC version with the Enhanced Edition fan mod, so I can't really commentate on the graphics. I'm sure this game looks great on a PS2 with the CRT though. When it comes to the presentation, I love how this game looks and how stylized the early 2000s CGI cutscenes are. CGI is always limited to technology at the time, and technology rapidly evolves. Unless these scenes are highly stylized or really lean into their art direction, a lot of CGI runs the risk of looking rough as time passes, and fortunately, Team Silent did an excellent job with these cutscenes. The CGI in these games lean heavily into the mostly realistic art style, which blends well with how stylized the characters and setting are. The CGI looks great and provides additional details to the world and characters the in-engine models can't. Where things start to fall apart though is when these models start to open their mouths.
Just for that you killed him?
What do you mean, just for that?
Eddie, you can't just kill someone because of the way they looked at you.
Oh yeah? Why not? Till now I always let people walk all over me. Just like that stupid dog. He had it coming too.
Eddie?
I was just joking, James.
Voice acting in Silent Hill 2 is voice acting from a late 90s and early 2000s Japanese game. If I'm being critical and compared to games today, yeah, sure, it's rough, but as someone born in the late 90s that loves campy voice acting, I love this. There's a stark juxtaposition between the haunting atmosphere and the comical voice acting at times. Both of these can exist, sure, but hearing some of James's deliveries when Eddie starts killing people, expressing he's hot when Angela walks away, and several other scenes are really funny. The nonchalant behavior the cast has throughout the game is really funny as well and is also very charming. Not all of the voice acting is campy though, and has some very heartfelt moments, just to be clear. I'm primarily talking about Mary, obviously. Something I do appreciate about these cutscenes is how well they're shot. Cinematography is something that I usually touch on in my videos, so we'll keep this quick. Team Silent's use of camera to hide things, the way they pan the canvas, and their shot selection really sells Silent Hill 2's outstanding atmosphere. Their visual storytelling in parallel with their minimalist approach to the narrative is outstanding. If you're curious for my full thoughts on the importance of cinematography and storytelling, you may enjoy my video on Remedy Entertainment where I break this down in detail. Getting back on topic, keen listeners may have heard me mention how well the cinematography harmonizes with the unforgettable atmosphere, and simply put, Silent Hill 2's atmosphere is one of its crowning achievements. The dense layer of fog inhibiting your vision, the dark environments with pages of lore, the haunting signs found throughout Silent Hill, and the messages written in blood throughout the game induce these feelings of fight or flight, claustrophobia, and anxiety, to name a few. I knew the fog was thick after the scene between Angela and James, but I remember being terrified after stepping foot into the apartment complex. Being in a mostly pitch black hallway searching for signs of life as monsters slowly approach from the darkness while almost all of the doors were locked was absolutely terrifying. And this sentiment persists throughout the game. Excluding cutscenes, there are many moments where the game lets you catch your breath. Between puzzles, navigating your way through the dangerous labyrinths, reading lore, and slowly unraveling the narrative, Team Silent has you engrossed in their design until the credits finally roll. Sustaining this sense of terror throughout the game while never feeling exhausted is incredibly difficult to do. Creative Assembly's Alien Isolation is a game that I frequently praise for their environments on this channel. I should really get around to making a video on this game at some point. The biggest issue Alien Isolation and other horror games face is that they must be paced well. In my opinion, horror games must master 3 core criteria to be considered excellent. These games must have an intense atmosphere, a solid narrative, and the plot needs airtight pacing. Some horror games rely heavily on touch of death mechanics when you're running away from something. Moments like these can be fine so long as the studio provides enough hints for players to deduce a path forward. The issue here lies when players start to die, and after dying the 4th or 5th time, the frustration will likely remove you from the atmosphere as your brain shifts from "this is terrifying" to "this is annoying now." The other recurring issue is usually with the pacing. Simply put, the longer a game is, the more time players have to become comfortable in the environment. When the environment shifts from terrifying to comforting and the plot meanders because not much is happening, the game can start to drag. Conversely, if the game is too short, doesn't offer much replay value, and is near the price of a full game, people start to feel like they're robbed. Before I keep going, let's make one thing abundantly clear here. 8 to 10 hours is perfectly acceptable for horror games. If the narrative is written to last around 8 to 10 hours, I will not complain. I felt like I needed to say this before someone thinks that I want like side quests or like more padding in games for whatever reason. Bringing this full circle, Silent Hill 2 has exquisite pacing, doesn't overstay its welcome, and hosts an incredible atmosphere that knows when to leverage its superb soundtrack. Speaking of the soundtrack, I'm not sure if this soundtrack entirely fits the game, but it's great nonetheless. Silent Hill 2's soundtrack provides this smooth yet haunting experience, adding to its cerebral atmosphere. Some tracks provide this horrifying atmosphere that enhances the levels and environments, while others carry this jazz post-rock fusion sound that I refuse to stop listening to. Listen, I don't understand music theory and I'm nowhere near qualified to discuss why this music is good, but Akira Yamaoka did a fantastic job with this game's original soundtrack. One of the few things I heard about Silent Hill 2, outside of it being a great game obviously, was that the soundtrack was great, and I certainly wasn't disappointed whenever the game blessed me with another track. However, what was a little disappointing was the gameplay. The gameplay and level design are honestly serviceable, but that's not why you're here. The gameplay is rudimentary like most survival horror games at the turn of the century. Think of it more as a means to an end. The game is still enjoyable, it just has some of that early 2000s PS2 jank most of us old people perpetually love. This is probably most apparent with Silent Hill 2's camera because we, thankfully, don't have these cameras anymore. When looking at Konami and other developers from the early 2000s, I don't think it's controversial to say that most developers didn't know what to do with these things. This resulted in most games not leveraging them at all or loosely pivoting the camera. I even remember some games like Kingdom Hearts 1 using the triggers to rotate the camera. Being a developer in the late 90s and early 2000s must have been rough since everyone was just feeling their way through manipulating the camera. Nothing articulates this better than looking at Resident Evil 1, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, Kingdom Hearts 1, Silent Hill 2, and Metal Gear Solid 3. Every one of these games has distinct control schemes and their own approach to camera control. This would result in a metaphorical arms race where developers competed to find the best way to control this unexplored dimension. The eventual winner of this race was of course Capcom's legendary Resident Evil 4, with honorable mentions to Kingdom Hearts 2 and Metal Gear Solid 3's Subsistence. Nevertheless, talking about camera is always funny since I'd argue we still haven't figured out the best solution for them in modern action games. I know all of this may have sounded irrelevant and off topic, but hopefully this context provides some insight into why Silent Hill 2 and most early PS2 games had weird control schemes and what the gaming landscape looked like in the early 2000s. Bringing this full circle with Silent Hill 2, Team Silent employs tank controls with fixed camera angles. Kind of. If you've seen either of my videos covering the Resident Evil 1 remake or MGS2, you'll know that I believe tank controls are perfectly fine so long as they fit two criteria. 1. The games must leverage fixed camera angles, and 2. The fixed camera angles are deliberate and synergize well with the game's overall design philosophy. The tank controls fit the first criteria, but the camera is still a bit jarring. Silent Hill 2 features the dynamic fixed camera, meaning while the angles might be static, the camera will pan forward and back as James moves around. Players are able to reorient the camera throughout the game as well. I, admittedly, haven't played a ton of games with this dynamic camera system. It's kind of jarring at times, and there's part of me wishing Team Silent simply committed to a more traditional fixed camera. The best way to describe the camera is as a byproduct of the early 2000s. Most developers were still figuring out in 2001, so it's not a huge issue. It's just one of those growing pains developers encounter during the transition from 5th to 6th generation of consoles. A small thing I admire, however, is how Silent Hill 2 tries to keep you in its atmosphere as much as possible. Keeping players in the universe while picking up items is a really cool small detail. I adore when developers refuse to let you leave their environments through menus and pause screens. I never realized the significance of this until I played Dark Souls for far too long. I do wish the game committed more to this instead of relying on the classic start menu, but I love how the game only pauses when picking up items instead of thrusting you into a menu. Similar to my thoughts on the camera, it was a different time. Nevertheless, a recurring issue nearly 20 years later in the survival horror game design are the lackluster bosses. Since I've covered this in my Resident Evil 2 remake video, I'll keep this short. Traditional survival horror games aren't mechanically dense enough to bolster engaging bosses. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just the reality of simplistic gameplay with a very narrow scope of actions. All of Silent Hill 2's bosses, and most survival horror bosses at that, devolve into the patented survival horror 4-step process: run, shoot, heal, and repeat. And while this could be seen as a slight against the game, given its limited scope of actions and that it's a persisting issue even in modern survival horror games, it is what it is. All in all, the gameplay has a lot in common with the voice acting. It's janky, charming, and it has its moments. Younger fans will probably have a hard time with this game due to the tank controls, camera, and voice acting. If you're willing to look past these issues and realize this is just how games were in the early 2000s, it's a charming relic of the past. Before getting into the story and thematic discussion, I'd like to remind everyone that if you're enjoying this video, a subscription and a like would go a far way in helping the channel grow. Thank you for your support, and back to the video. In order to appreciate Silent Hill 2's narrative, we need to quickly discuss the nature of minimalist narratives and why they're so appealing. Minimalist narratives force us to critically engage with narratives to piece together the artist's intended themes. This approach makes the plot and narrative feel very rewarding as the audience unravels mysteries, themes, and new perspectives. This storytelling method requires writers to balance providing enough information without being too direct. The breadcrumbs need to be subtle yet distinct enough for us to recognize and ponder their implications. And while I love this method of storytelling, it certainly won't be everyone's cup of tea. Most writers leverage a handful of proven story archetypes to keep viewers engaged. These archetypes are the classic coming-of-age story, the hero's journey, or a tragedy. These archetypes clearly define protagonists, antagonists, the setting, overarching themes, and a resolution. Stories like these are timeless and popular for a reason. Character development is clearly defined, and key plot points are what's memorable instead of subtle, complex themes found in a subdued narrative. I remember beating Silent Hill 2 and wrapping my mind around its characters, the numerous endings, and what I was just experiencing. And after spending a few days gathering my thoughts and consulting with a few friends, I think I'm more or less ready to provide my thoughts on the story and the themes that it tackles. There is one thing I'd like to share before diving into this section though. Before writing these videos, something I try to do is really let the story marinate and avoid everyone's opinions. I'll probably make a video on this at some point, but I think experiencing a game, movie, anime, TV show, album, or any type of media in a vacuum is very important. Seeing review scores and opinions tend to create baselines of expectations. For example, seeing an accolades trailer for a movie or a game conditions us to expect something really good or even a masterpiece. When combining review scores in parallel with the marketing cycle games go through, you run the risk of creating these lofty expectations that developers may have no desire to satiate. Simply put, I like going into things blind, assessing aspects I liked and disliked, drawing my own conclusions, and then engaging in discussions and watching videos. What I'm trying to get at here is that I haven't looked up anything about Silent Hill 2 at all, so I probably missed some things. With all that said, let's dive into my interpretation of the story. Silent Hill 2 follows a man named James Sunderland who receives a letter from his deceased wife, Mary. Wanting answers and curious of this letter's nature, he searches Silent Hill for her. While James certainly receives his development throughout the plot, I adore how Team Silent accomplishes this through leveraging Silent Hill 2's cast of characters. Most of the characters have their own arcs in the narrative, tackling social issues or are learning to live with their trauma. This is all relevant to James as he alludes to not having any reason to live in the first hour. Angela is the first character we meet and she embodies all of this, so let's start with her. Angela tackles the importance of family and the trauma associated with being born into a dysfunctional home. She spends most of the game searching for her parents until it's revealed she had an abusive and unwanted encounter with her father. Angela eventually demonstrates how scarred she is when she attacks James for trying to help while reliving moments from her childhood later in the game. Finally, in a room on fire symbolic of Angela's fading sanity, she mistakes James as her mother before blaming herself for everything that happened. She then asks if you can take care of her and heal her pain, and after no response, she walks away. Angela's search for her mother, her resentment for her father, yearning to be nurtured, and these seeds of trauma will continue impacting her life, relationships, and decisions that she makes. Unable to grow close to others, being robbed of her youth, and living with this trauma forces her to question her worth, while highlighting the pivotal role your family and upbringing play in forming who we are. It's my understanding that Angela is meant to make the players question James's upbringing, his relationship with his family, and what sort of person James really is. Assuming everyone in Silent Hill is a figment of James's imagination, Angela may serve as the gateway into James's youth and shows the player who he was before meeting his wife. This theory also begs the question whether James experienced Angela's encounters and who he became because of it. I believe Eddie's destructive nature has the potential to be a byproduct of this experience, so let's talk about him next. Eddie is introduced puking into a toilet, teased by Laura for being fat, kills a person, says he hates everyone for bullying him, participates in a riveting boss battle, and he dies as James suffers with the consequences of killing a human. Eddie's narrative is much shorter and less emotionally involved as Angela's. I believe his destructive nature, social isolation, and obviously bullying are what's tackled here. I think all of this relates to James as it mirrors his destructive nature. I'm not sure if this was a byproduct of his upbringing or maybe he was frustrated at Mary's declining health. Assuming the latter, James may have taken this frustration out on Mary, his family, or even those around him. While taking your problems out on others is clearly wrong, many facing traumatic experiences are so emotionally occupied that they may have a hard time understanding others have been through similar experiences. Failure to recognize this may cause us to lash out, hurting those around us. Furthermore, James is clearly hinted at not being the best person, suggesting he likely exhibited self-centered narcissistic tendencies when Mary began to get sick. Not everyone can be empathetic to your situation, and that's perfectly fine. However, desiring everyone to experience your personal hardships is a destructive train of thought. Turning everyone away and refusing sympathy will not help you move forward. Assuming Eddie represents part of James' psyche, this adds another potentially terrifying layer to James's character. I also wonder if anyone ostracized him because of Mary's fate, but that's more speculation on my end. Before talking about Pyramid Head and Maria, I'd just like to say I have no idea what Laura's meant to represent. My best guess is that she's meant to represent Mary in some form, but I don't know why. Maybe she's optimistic or something, but I'm not sure, so looking forward to what everybody says in the comments below. Anyways, let's shift gears into Pyramid Head. First and foremost, this character is so crazy popular for what he represents in my opinion. Before I even knew what Silent Hill was, I've seen or heard Pyramid Head since 2014's The Evil Within, which is a game I'd love to cover on this channel one day. Anyways, Pyramid Head is an interesting character, especially since you know so little about him and because the game doesn't directly tell you his relevance. My initial impression is that he was this monster that just wanted to kill me, but things changed as I slowly picked apart his actions, character, and his overall plot relevance. Rewatching the cutscenes with Eddie and Laura made me realize that they couldn't see this creature. The only person who actually interacts with him is Maria, which is probably another figment of James's psyche. Believing Pyramid Head to be another manifestation of James's thoughts, I think he's meant to mirror James's human desires as well as psychological force dragging him back to reality. Many of us get addicted to pleasure and tend to overindulge at times. Managing these desires can be challenging for most, so this balance between remaining sane while indulging in your desires is interesting yet dangerously relatable. Now, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I'm usually a bit more direct with my thoughts, but this video will get demonetized if I'm too direct here. Simply put, addressing these themes with such symbolism and grotesque imagery highlights how relatable and terrifying they can be. As we transition into adulthood and navigate relationships, we often confront parts of ourselves we were previously unaware of. This journey of self-discovery can be challenging, and James's struggle is a clear reflection of this. Many of us will find these themes uncomfortably relatable as they touch on universal struggles we all face. Hopefully you can read between the lines of what I'm trying to say here. Now, let's move on to a person who probably won't get this video shut down, Maria. Maria's thematic implications are absolutely terrifying and beautifully serves as the culmination of everything we've discussed. Maria, in my interpretation, represents James's longing for a relationship, his inability to face his problems, the conflicting nature his human desires introduce, and his perception of his wife. Marriage, in theory at least, means you'll be together forever. James, now a widower, has no one to interact with. He's left with his thoughts and memories of Mary. As we discussed with Angela and Eddie, tackling life on your own can be challenging, not only because these two characters are single, but they inadvertently push people away that are trying to help them. Confronting your grief alone may result in a destructive behavior towards yourself and even those around you. If James had parents, friends, acquaintances, a therapist, or anyone to talk to, maybe they could help him unpack his emotions. Instead, James is stuck in a dark place all alone. Assuming these characters are a manifestation of James's subconscious, he clearly needs an outlet or just someone to talk to. Nevertheless, he doesn't have any friends and finds himself detached from society. Sure, society isn't the most morally just and often flawed in their own beliefs, but refusing to engage with it entirely may be even more destructive. In parallel with this discussion, it's difficult to ignore how Maria is dressed and the psychological implications that persist in James' mind because of it. If Pyramid Head is the manifestation of James's needs, Maria is the persevering reminder of them and his inability to confront himself. Maria being dressed like this, combined with her inviting attitude and dependable nature, accurately depicts how James saw Mary. I don't think I need to discuss why viewing women like this is clearly a bad thing. The propensity for this subconscious thought creates more questions pertaining to James's past relationships and how he views other women, which is again very bad. James creates Maria because he's lonely and knows that he needs someone. The entity he models after his wife informs players of how he perceived her. While not being a great representation, Maria displays James' understanding that social interaction and relationships are a necessity for somebody's well-being. Maria is an exquisite representation of the theme Silent Hill 2 attempts to convey. She beautifully weaves various fragments of all the characters' themes into one being. When taking a step back to reflect on the cast development, the ending, and how it all relates to James, he's clearly a broken man haunted by his past and scared of the future. The setting of Silent Hill is an incredible canvas, allowing James to be completely immersed in his subconscious. This small town allows him to face his psychological fears through incredible character studies all relating back to him. And when considering how grounded and uncomfortably relatable the themes this game presents are, it's absolutely terrifying. Hopefully everything I've discussed articulates this well enough on its own, but I clearly love this story, the setting, characters, the psychological implications, relevant themes, and how well all of this is executed. Silent Hill 2 being a minimalist story means most of what I discussed is implied and not directly told to us. This narrative forced me to recall relationships I've had in the past, how flawed of a person I am, and found myself revisiting my past. Although I'm nowhere near as damaged as James, thankfully, demonstrating empathy and learning from others is always important. And while this narrative is great and I clearly love discussing character interpretations and listening to others' thoughts, a lot of these thoughts are just perspective. Interpretations often yield more nuanced conversations than binary this did or didn't happen discussions. And while I love how the narrative is executed, concrete answers are sometimes greatly appreciated. Before transitioning into some problems I had with the story, I'd like to remind everyone that I played this game in a vacuum. I spoke with very few people about the plot, I didn't watch any video essays or read any reviews. The thoughts in this video are entirely my own, meaning I may have misunderstood characters, themes, symbolism, and other stuff throughout the game. I'm excited to read the comments and listen to everyone's thoughts because I'm sure I missed out on a lot. With that out of the way, let's quickly cover a few problems that I had with the story. Towards the end of the game in the Lakeview Hotel, James discovers a VHS with a recording of his final moments with Mary. He's depicted as suffocating Mary with a pillow while comforting her later on. The cavalier nature of this narrative makes bifurcating reality from hallucinations difficult at times, and this difficulty introduces new ramifications to James's character. What I'm getting at here is whether or not James actually kills Mary. If James killed Mary, this entire story evolves into his journey towards atonement. However, if Mary is actually alive, this story shifts into an emotional goodbye, forcing James to confront his true nature. One path finds James forced to encounter his humanity and ultimately develop, while the other path implies he comes to terms with who he is. While these interpretations are both thought-provoking, I believe they have two different resolutions while not being entirely mutually exclusive. Nevertheless, calling this a problem is challenging as it's a common reservation many have with minimalist storytelling. Regardless of the concrete nature of things, both resolutions are powerful and moving in my opinion. Then again, I could be just dumb. Anyways, we've been here for a while, so let's start to wrap this video up by discussing the remake and my closing thoughts on this beautiful game. Watching the community react to the Silent Hill 2 remake has been a roller coaster, and that's me trying to be nice. People were excited for this remake since it meant Silent Hill was coming back, and then they saw Bloober team, optimism deflated, the media got their hands on the game, had nothing but glowing impressions, and now fans are cautiously optimistic. So, what do I think? I don't know. I've never played a Bloober game before. There are countless videos online of fans voicing their criticisms towards them, and I'm sure there's some validity to their feelings here. I've also deliberately avoided most of the trailers and coverage of this game because I want to be surprised going in. Honestly, I think my expectations are pretty reasonable with this remake. Konami and Bloober already have a mostly refined blueprint with Silent Hill 2 in my opinion. The stages, atmosphere, soundtrack, characters, and story are already there. The focus should be providing a graphical facelift, streamlining the camera with modern game design, updating the combat a bit, and providing additional replay value, because $70 for a 10-hour experience in 2024 is a great way to get people online upset. All in all, I'm hoping for the best, and worst case scenario, we can always revisit the mostly excellent Enhanced Edition mod. The best compliment I can give Silent Hill 2 is that I wish I played it earlier. Despite its janky camera, combat, and other early 2000s growing pains, I understand why many consider this game to be a masterpiece. Its nuanced, minimalist storytelling and thematically rich narrative are horrifying, yet so captivating in its exploration of humanity. With that said, everyone's mileage will vary with this narrative, but I struggle to call this an issue as that's the nature of these subdued stories. You have to love analyzing, picking things apart, and discussing your thoughts to get the most out of this narrative. If you're willing to engage with it as intended, the story may leave you with a truly lasting impact. As someone who's played all of the mainline Resident Evil games, you owe it to yourself to check out Team Silent's Silent Hill games if they're all this good. While Resident Evil has a better gameplay design philosophy and more intentionally charming characters, the atmosphere, world, introspective narrative, and overall tone of Silent Hill is something incredible to experience. Then again, with my love for other games on this channel, I think it's pretty clear I have a significant bias towards introspective, minimalist stories about mankind. I love this game, and I can't wait to check out the first, third, and potentially the fourth game when I get the chance. If you sat through this entire video and still haven't played Silent Hill 2, thanks for being here, but like, what are you doing? Like, go and play this game, or keep an eye on the remake, because this is an experience you absolutely shouldn't miss. Alright, it's time for the best part of the video, as always. So first and foremost, thank you to everybody who made it through all the way to the end of the video. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to follow me on Twitch, like I said way in the beginning of the video, if you want to catch the show live. We have a fun time over on Twitch, have a fun time over on the Discord, which you can also join with a link in the description. And a huge shout out to my channel members and my Twitch subscribers for making all this content even possible. And if you'd like to consider supporting my creative efforts, becoming a channel member or subscribing on Twitch is a great way to help the channel. And there's some good perks that I can give to you guys, right? Like, you'll be able to receive early video access, a special Discord role, access to my scripts, outline, other project management tools that I use to get these videos off the ground, emotes that I'm working on, obviously on Twitch, and more perks when, whenever I get around to thinking about them. But a couple of questions for you guys. So first and foremost, is Silent Hill 2 your favorite? I've heard that Silent Hill 3 is a lot of people's favorites, so I'm kind of leaning towards playing that next, but I was also told that I need to play the first one before I play the third one, so obviously I'll be probably playing the first one first. Are you interested in the remake? What are your concerns? Are you going to pick it up? In the midst of writing this script, I saw an article on my Twitter feed, or X, or whatever you want to call it, pretty much just saying how like Bloober has extended the duration of the game. Not entirely sure what implications that's going to have on like the game, like for the pacing and all that stuff, because obviously I love the pacing of Silent Hill 2. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Which other Silent Hill games would you like to see remade? What's your favorite way to play these games? Do you have the original PS2 version with a CRT? Do you prefer the enhanced edition? Like, what's your cup of tea? Which one should I play next in your opinion? I'm looking forward to playing more of this series. It's a super interesting, thought-provoking series that I just wasn't ready for its nuanced nature, and that's why this video took so long to flesh out, because I wanted to just take time for this game to like really resonate, so I had something interesting to say about it instead of like, hey guys, this shit's pretty cool. So anyways, thanks again for watching. Feel free to join the Discord, and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.